Welcome back to another exciting round of parallelograms. I love geometry, so this is fun for me. We are now in the part where we're going to solve problems. Okay, so we're done with the graph proofs, but what we want to do is we want to figure out um, different ways to solve for variables and angles, sides, whatever it is in a parallelogram and other shapes. So we'll look at the diagram here. And let's look at this example. Find the unknown angle measures and the values of x and y that make this quadrilateral a parallelogram. So in order for this to be a parallelogram, we want the opposite angles to be congruent to each other, or we want the consecutive angles to be supplementary. And because the variables, you'll notice they're not opposite of each other, in lieu of setting up a system of equations, I'm going to use the property that opposite angles are consecutive angles are supplementary. Which means they add to 180. So if you look at these two angles here, A and D, they're not congruent by any shot. This is definitely acute, that's definitely obtuse. But the relationship is that they add to 180. So I know that the measure of angle A plus the measure of angle D is equal to 180. So I'm going to go ahead and just substitute x and 4x minus 5 into that. So I'm going to distribute the 3. That's going to give me 12x minus 15. And before I can solve, I do need to combine my like terms. Now, make sure that you add these together since they're both positive. So that's actually going to be 13x minus 15 equals 180. And now we're ready to solve this algebraic equation. So to solve that, we do want to add 15 to both sides. And when I do that, I'm going to get 180 plus 15, which is going to be 195. I don't know 195 divided by 13 off the top of my head, so let's do that real quick. Looks like I get 15 for my answer. So when I divide by 13, the value of x is 15. And there's that. Let's get y. Same way. These two are also supplementary. So measure of angle B and measure of angle C add to 180. Substitute your expressions in. Distribute that. We don't want that 5 hanging out there by itself. 5 times 12 is 60. Okay, our like terms, we got y and 5y. That's going to give you 6y. And negative 6 and 60. That's the same thing as 60 minus 6. So 6y plus 54 equals 180. Okay, since that's a plus 54, I do want to subtract that out. So 180 minus 54, if you need to use your calculator, that's going to give you 126, I believe. And doing a quick division is going to get you 21. So y is going to be 21. As far as getting the angles, it's just a matter of plugging in. So you can plug in wherever you want to start with. Since that's x, it's pretty obvious that angle D rather is going to be 15. But what you might not realize is that there's another 15-degree angle, and that's going to be the one on the opposite side. So if I know that that's 15, I don't really need to plug in y to get 15 for that. You understand? For angle B, it should be 15 regardless. Now, if I plug in 21 and I do 21 minus 6, there's your 15 right there. But you didn't need to do that. And the same thing with these angles. These two angles are supplementary. So I don't need to plug in if I know that these two add to 180. I can just do 180 minus 15. That's going to give you 165. And by virtue of these being opposite, that's going to be 165. Now, if you forgot that or just kind of out of habit decided to plug them in, you would get 165. There's no shame in doing that. But I'm just trying to save you a little bit of time. So if I plug in for that 3 times 4x, so 4 times 15 minus 5, 4 times 15 is 60. 60 minus 5 is 55. And if you do 55 times 3 in your calculator, you'll get 165. That's the long way to do it, but you are certainly welcome to do that. So, got your angles, got your variables. Let's move on to the next example. This one looks a lot like the last one, but look where the angle positions are. See where my x is there? I don't have an x next to it. I have an x across from it. So instead of saying consecutive angles are supplementary, we're going to say opposite angles are congruent. And we're going to set equal. So we're going to say the measure of angle A equals the measure of angle B. You don't really need these parentheses if there's nothing to be distributed. So I'm going to go ahead and write that. Distribute the 2. That's going to give you 6x minus 16. Now we got an x on both sides, so we want to make sure they get all the x's to one side. Since there are no like terms, we want to start subtracting. Take away 5x from both sides, and you're going to get x. These will cancel out. Add 16 to both sides, and you're going to get 18. So x is 18. Let's go ahead and write that on there. Why don't you try y? Pause the video and tackle it yourself. See if you can get it, and then you can check my answer. So I'm going to say 4y minus 2 is equal to 3y plus 16. And that comes from the fact that measure of angle C is equal to measure of angle B. And it doesn't matter what order you write them. So that's going to be 4y minus 8 equals 3y plus 16. So we're going to solve this pretty much in the same fashion as x's. Take away the 3y from both sides. That's going to give you down to y. 16's left over after those cancel. Add the 8. That's going to give you y equals 24. And I'll write that on here to keep track of everything. And then plug in to get your angles. So I guess I'll just start with this x down here. Angle A, excuse me, is going to be 2 times 3. X is 18. So 3 times 18 minus 8. Go ahead and cheat. And I don't really consider it cheating, by the way. I'm just saying that jokingly. So I'm getting 92 degrees. Now, I'm not going to do anything else with plugging in. All right, angle A is 92. Think about the other angle that's 92. Which one is it? That's right, it's angle D. You don't need to show work for that if you did it for one. These two angles are supplementary. Just do a little subtraction. You got your answer. 180 minus 92. What is it? 88. 88. So you see what I'm saying? Save yourself some time. You get all your angles and your variables. And there are your parallelograms. So angle measures are important, but let's talk about sides. And before we do that, let's talk about some other shapes you can get from parallelograms. This is a little tree diagram. Parallelograms can be thought of as rhombuses, rectangles, and squares. Rhombuses have 4 congruent sides. So it's basically a parallelogram where all the sides are equal. Diagonals are perpendicular. Remember the symbol for perpendicular? Across at right angles, it's an upside down T. And diagonals also, they bisect opposite angles. So a picture of a rhombus will look like this. It'll be a parallelogram. All of these will be congruent. Your diagonals will cross at 90 degrees. And those 4 angles are going to be congruent to each other. These two are congruent. These two are congruent. Same thing here. That's what that means when it says diagonals bisect opposite angles. A rectangle is a parallelogram that has right angles. We all know rectangles. Everybody uses rectangles more than any other quadrilateral. So it's got 4 right angles. And also the diagonals are actually going to be congruent to each other. So because it's a parallelogram still, we'll find that they bisect each other, but also that there's only going to be one slash because all 4 of these parts are the same. So diagonals are congruent. And finally, a square is just everything here. So if a rectangle and a rhombus had a baby, it'd be a square. All right, so let's look at those last 2 examples, and we'll be in good shape to do our day 4 assignment. Day 3 assignment, parallelograms. So example 6 has a rectangle and a rhombus in it. Let's talk about the rectangle first. We're given AC and DB, and those are the diagonals of the rectangle. And if you look back to what we just wrote, diagonals are congruent, which means I can set those 2 equal to each other. I know that AC is going to have the same length as DB. So 4x minus 12 equals 2x plus 8. So solving for that, I do want to get the x's on both sides, so I'm going to subtract the 2x. Add the 12. And divide by 2. Now it's not asking for x, it's asking for AC. So I will need to plug that 10 back in for x to find the answer to my question. So 4 times 10 is 40. 40 minus 12, let's see, 40 minus 10 is 30, minus another 2. That's going to be 28. And if I wanted to extend that question just a little bit further, if I know AC is 28, I know DB is going to be 28, but furthermore, remember, a rectangle is a parallelogram. So if I cut that 28 in half, these are going to be 14, 14, 14, and 14. So you can get more information from that if you took the time for it. But 28 is the answer for that one. And last, we're talking about a rhombus. On a rhombus, remember that the diagonals are perpendicular and all sides are congruent. Those two properties will come up in this example. So we aren't going to put a right angle there because they do cross at 90 degrees. Even if it might not look like it, or if it's not drawn to scale, put it in there if they tell you if it's a rhombus. Also mark all four of these the same. That's going to be super helpful. All right, so since EG is 12, and I know that it's a parallelogram, so I know these are cut in half, I know that half of 12 is going to be 6. So I'm going to write 6 there, 6 there. Same thing with a 16. HF, cut that in half. And that's going to be 8 and 8. And my goal is to figure out what is the length of FG so I can get the perimeter. Because if I know that this is, if this were 5, it's not, but if it were 5, then the perimeter would be 5 plus 5 plus 5 plus 5, which would be 20. So to solve for that segment, you use Pythagorean theorem. A squared plus B squared equals C squared. And C represents the hypotenuse. The side of that rhombus will be the hypotenuse. 8 squared is 64. 6 squared is 36. Those combine and add to 100. Don't forget to take the square root at the end. So my side is 10, which means my perimeter is going to be 10 times 4. 10 plus 10 plus 10 plus 10. Perimeter's distance around. That's going to be 40 units, whatever that unit is. And that's it for the day 3 lesson, parallelograms. Hopefully you have enough information now in your toolkit to be able to do the day 3 assignment and be successful on that. Again, if you have any questions, let me know. Thank you.